Hello, this is too many people. Hi. We'll get there. We'll get there. Hi, my name is Patrick Klebeck. I am the senior news editor over at Giant Bomb. I hope you know that every time people watch the videos, then they think you are booing me, which would be very strange for this panel especially. I am thankfully joined on stage today by the designer of Depression Quest, the amazing Zoe Quinn. She is going to continue to work on her slides as Google did not save them while I'm going to start out with a presentation of my own. We're going to switch over to Zoe after that, and then we'll try and sneak in as many questions as we can at the end. I was waiting for someone to approve of my strategy. So as of today, I have about 53,000 followers on Twitter. It's not Jeff Gerstmann numbers, but it's nothing to sneeze at. And for the past 3 years, I've been the news editor at Giant Bomb, a game website where there's just as much focus on the games as much as there is on the people talking about the games. And because we're front and center, people have, let's call them strong feelings about us. Those feelings aren't always positive. And I'm going to share a couple of the things that I see on a daily basis, including one that I plucked this morning, and I should be explicit in saying there is some pretty deeply troubling language, but we'll try and move past that pretty quickly. I can't really answer that question. I get that one every single day. I'm sure it is the same person. So this is an example from YouTube. This is a random example pulled from, I guess, Google+. I don't check it that often. And then this one was from earlier today, which also gave me a chance to plug my panel in my Tumblr account because he gave me a perfect example. So I don't show these to shock you or to make you suddenly feel bad for me. I have an incredibly cool job that I love dearly, and I get to do it every single day. But I show to give you a sense of a little bit of what I see. And it's not just me, I'm just the one that gets to come up here and talk about it. And everyone doesn't have to like me, like I totally get that, and I'm in a position different than most, where being a visible public figure that finds himself often talking about subjects that I will call passionate debate surrounds them. And most people aren't public figures. Most of you aren't. Although you could argue that being on Twitter makes you a public figure, but that's a separate talk. If I complain about when I'm being harassed, there are thousands of people ready to pet my ego and let me know that everything's okay. Everyone else is supposed to just kind of deal with it or ultimately give up on having a public conversation at all. I don't really subscribe to the idea of ignoring the trolls and they'll go away because, pro tip, they don't. And that sucks. I really don't like that that's kind of where we're at today, is just avoiding things. What I showed you there isn't passionate debate critiquing my opinions. It's basically just bullying. It's enough to make a person really want to stop doing this or question if it's really worth the time and effort to keep putting yourself out there. But I also know that this is not most of my audience. It is a small but very, very vocal 1%. And even though it may not represent most of the audience, and it probably doesn't represent the people in this audience today, it can certainly feel like that on a bad day, because it really only takes one, no matter how long you do this. And we need to talk about this because we need to make sure people know what's happening. I'm equipped to deal with this, unfortunately, because it's part of my job, even if dealing with jerks can't necessarily go on my resume. And if this is the kind of response that I'm getting, you can only imagine why others would choose to stay quiet, because who wants to put up with this? People often tell me on a daily basis that they choose to not speak up on some of these topics that incite this kind of response because they don't want to see that. And I can't blame them. Like, it can ruin my day, it can ruin theirs as well. So they choose to be quiet. And school didn't teach me how to handle thousands of people screaming at me at once. There's no manual for handling yourself on the internet, although if you have one, I'm willing to listen. And I'm not saying we need to make every comment section this wonderful place. That's not viable. Therein lies madness. But avoiding comment sections and places like it reflect how we have given complete control of internet discourse to a certain kind of person. And I don't think we have to accept that, and part of this is hopefully explaining how you might be able to help. So a Pew poll from last September found that 25% of respondents have confessed to using an anonymous comment or engaging with one on the internet. 49% said they have used their real name at some point. 47% said instead they had used a screen name. So the nature of anonymity, I think, is really interesting. Removing anonymity is not a clear-cut solution to any of these problems. We're more likely scientifically to share ideas through private channels more often than we are to do in real life or publicly. Psychologist John Suhler, he coins this term the online disinhibition effect. And so this is sort of a quote from his paper. This disinhibition can work in two seemingly opposite directions. Sometimes people share very personal things about themselves. They reveal secret emotions, fears, wishes. They show unusual acts of kindness and generosity, sometimes going out of their way to help others. We may call this benign disinhibition. However, this disinhibition is not always so salutary. We witness rude language, harsh criticism, anger, hatred, and even threats. We may call this toxic disinhibition. So I think people should be allowed to comment anonymously. I think it allows us to share ideas without having them permanently attached to our name, because ideas grow, they develop, they change, and that's kind of the beauty of conversation and why I like to engage with it. And it's kind of what's lovely about being anonymous, because when I write an article, my first draft isn't what gets published, and when someone makes a game, the first prototype isn't what you end up playing. And I think ideas are the same way, and anonymity lets us experiment with those ideas. The problem is we can't hold people accountable for what they say in the same way that we can do in real life. And that because we can't hold them accountable, it makes it troublesome to go into some of those places. I love that 4chan exists, even if they desperately wish I didn't. And as we de-anonymize the internet in a large way, there should be places for people to behave without having to look over their shoulder about what they're saying. I mean, the internet started as a dirty, carefree place, and we still kind of need some grime on it, I think, from time to time. And I should be careful, kind of, sometimes I feel like if I say 4chan too many times, it's like kind of like Candyman, and if like, you say it 3 times in a mirror, then he just sort of pops up. And Keynote just added GIF support, and it's GIF. So I added a couple of those to this. So I don't really think it's about anonymity, though, right? I think it's about responsibility. So if you remember Flappy Bird, in short, the creator of the game announced he was removing the game from the App Store and Google Play and wherever else it was available. And people were pissed. And they took to Twitter to specifically yell awful things at him. And this isn't 1 or 2 nasty messages, which is, you know, a little bit more on the level of what I deal with daily. Like, we're talking thousands and thousands of messages in which most of them amount to please go kill yourself because you're choosing to remove this game and allow us to play it. So sociopsychologists call exactly this phenomenon the diffusion of responsibility. A person is less likely to take responsibility for action and inaction or inaction when others are present. The phenomenon tends to occur in groups of people above a certain critical size and when responsibility is not explicitly assigned. It rarely occurs when the person is alone, and diffusion increases with groups of 3 or more. A common example being when you see a car crash and nobody stops to help. The whole internet's kind of a car crash. And this happens all the time, but it's not exclusive to games. And pretty much anything I'm talking about, I don't think is a game culture problem. I think it's actually an internet culture problem and the tools we have on the internet. And I don't think lifting the veil of anonymity is a one-stop solution. People act like this with their names, as we witness with places that use things like Facebook comments. But people still don't feel responsible for their words on the internet or elsewhere, so they speak extremely freely. On my blog, I posted a conversation I had with one of the people who was yelling at the Flappy Bird creator. And because 140 characters isn't a great way to have a nuanced exchange of ideas, I asked, hey, do you want to talk about this, in private? And let's chat about why you think you're allowed to tell someone to kill themselves. He agreed, wanted an opportunity to explain his actions, and I asked him if we could publish the exchange and I'd keep his identity anonymous. He agreed and then spent thousands of words justifying why he told someone to kill themselves and why it was okay. And here are a couple of excerpts from that conversation. Well, I don't view it as entirely violent. Maybe he could use potassium cyanide in a bottle of Ambien. It was just a suggestion to end his own life so the earth might be spared his insufferable and stubborn existence. if someone is so weak of will, so volatile of temperament, so easily influenced by the slightest whimper that they take their own life because something I typed in 1 second on the other side of the earth, then perhaps they're doing us all a favor by eliminating their obviously flawed genes from the pool. And here's probably the most important and revealing line of the entire exchange. Why do I choose to remind them in such an abrasive way? I feel powerless and I take my frustrations out on others. So this went on for a long time, like thousands and thousands of words. The whole exchange is up on my blog. And eventually I hadn't kind of gotten back to him for a couple of days, so another email pops up in my box. And after reading quotes like that, and it goes on and on like that, the last thing I expected was this person to then have an explicit and equally long apology. He told me my tweet was overly harsh and could have made a fragile ego like his crack apart. Fortunately, and to be quite honest, I doubt it had any effect on him and was lost in the din of comments he received that day. But it could have. I've left behind my more destructive habits in real life. Perhaps it's time to leave them on the internet as well. The line between them is becoming blurred whether I like it or not, and it's past time I respected that. So I'm not going to say that asking every single person to explain their actions, why they say something is going to result in a come to internet Jesus moment, but there's a lesson I think that applies to all of us, which is that there's someone on the other side of that computer, that tablet, that phone. They may not read your comment, but they might. They may not take your comment seriously, but they might. And that small chance is reason enough to tread lightly. You should speak your opinion, but speak so thoughtfully and thinking that they might read it. And much of this talk so far has kind of focused on the bad apples. Like, it's really easy to get caught up in the worst of the worst when oftentimes it gets murky and gray very quickly. And it's important to remember that we're also prone to making these mistakes, and it's not just about those that espout hate speech, because like I said, they're the easy targets. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm guilty of being a jerk too, and that we can all kind of get dragged into this and make everything louder. So there's this service called Adblock. Used by millions and millions of people to circumvent advertising on the internet. Some people use it for legitimate security concerns. Some people use it because they think the ad model doesn't work anymore. All sorts of reasons that are completely legitimate for people to use it. And at some point last year, Adblock was raising money to buy ads to promote their service that removes ads. And obviously, as someone that takes the idea of trying to make a living on the internet, I take conversations about Adblock pretty seriously, and they kind of get me fired up when I talk about them. So a Twitter user asked me this, which is, what is your response to people who don't care about ads affecting your site? Is there even one? And, reasonably so, you might think someone that's like, hey, we need to calm down a little bit with the way we talk, and we need to think about our actions, would have like a really reasonable response to a question like that. But instead, I just told 53,000 people they should just die in a fire. Now, granted, it has a question mark. I was going for sarcasm, but sarcasm doesn't get you very far on the internet. And this comment upset people. It validated the worst suspicions of the very people that I'm trying to win over to my side. And I painted people with a really broad brush and used hyperbole in order to make myself feel better, because I can shout that and I know a bunch of people are listening. And I'd done the very thing that I'm on this stage to condemn. I'm a hypocrite, and it's always worth acknowledging when you too sort of fall into that trap, because it's very easy. So one of my favorite Twitter accounts is called Avoid the Comments. Its tagline: this will tweet periodic reminders to not read the comment sections for, well, pretty much anything ever. And one of my favorites is, you wouldn't listen to someone named Bonerman26 in real life. Don't read the comments. He has a point, but I would like to point out that my reporting says that nobody currently owns Bonerman26 on any social network, so just keep that in mind, I'm sure it'll be gone by the end of this panel. But so I try to think of this way most of the time. Yeah, sometimes comment sections contain insight and reasoned discussion, but do you really want to take that chance? And I do, because I'm not comfortable with giving up the greatest, most accessible communication tools ever made. I'm not saying everyone's going to agree, and in fact, it's great when we disagree, but to simply give up on parts of the internet because it currently seems like it's not working seems like a really bad attitude. And I want my ideas questioned, I want my preconceived notions challenged, and none of this happens if I decide, and if we all decide, to go to our corners of the internet and just agree with one another and tell each other how great of a job we're doing. So here's a good example of something that recently happened. So the artist Elizabeth Simmons and the Colbert Report writer, I guess, although now Late Show writer, Rob Dubbin, expressed they were uncomfortable with some of the Nazi-like imagery found in Vlambier's Luftrausers. The two of them thoughtfully explained their position on Twitter. This is called criticism, and in fact, it's well-articulated criticism. So even though I'm not Jewish, so even though I don't have much of a problem with the imagery in Luftrausers, I respect Simmons and Dubbin are coming at this from a very different life perspective. I believe scientists call this empathy, but they're still looking into it. And they didn't ask Vlambeer to change the way Luftrausers looks. They're only raising the question about whether its aesthetic could be seen as leveraging Nazi imagery in a way that's glossed over because the game is really damn fun, which it is. So it's especially important to be critical of what we love because we are often blind to the things that we love the most. And Vlambeer didn't have to respond to this, but they in fact did. And they wrote an extremely long blog post where, here's the excerpt that kind of stood out to me. We do have to accept that our game could make some people uncomfortable. We're extremely sad about that, and we sincerely apologize for that discomfort. The fact is that no interpretation of a game is wrong. When you create something, you leave certain implications of what you're making. If we accept there's no wrong interpretation of a work, we also have to accept that some of those interpretations could not be along the lines of what we're trying to create. He also, Vlambeer then went on to explain several hundred words about why Luftrausers is the way it is. It's unlikely Luftrausers will undergo any major aesthetic change as a result of what Simmons and Dubbin said, but the conclusion of this exchange brings a better understanding of what Vlambeer wanted to do by creating Luftrausers. No one has to agree with either side, but our understanding of Luftrausers' place in game culture was deepened as a result of a critical exchange where no one told each other to screw off. Everyone won, and we understood the game just a little bit better. So this isn't normal. How do we encourage more of exchanges like this? And that's the really tough question, because I think awareness is one thing, coming up with solutions is a whole lot harder. There was this study that I was reading about last August in which about 1,000 participants were asked to read a blog post that was completely fake. It had to do with like particles having some health benefits or something like that. And the blog had fictional comments written for it as well. And half of the participants read comments that calmly discuss the pros and cons of like maybe using these health particles, and half the participants read rude comments that were filled with swear words and other forms of nastiness. The example that I pulled was, if you don't see the benefits of using nanotechnology in these kinds of products, you're an idiot, which, you see stuff like this in terms of game discussion all the time. And what they found was super surprising, because they found that the people who read the civil comments came out with an opinion very similar to the one they held after reading the story. And those that read the rude comments reported having a much more polarized opinion about the effects of the particles being discussed. So what this means is that what we're reading below the fold, whether it's a video or an article, is directly influencing how we react to what we're reading, even if we're not aware that's actually what's going on. And this is, an article about science. Like, it gets way messier, way faster when we're talking about Hideo Kojima's, decision to hide a bomb inside a woman's private parts in Ground Zeroes. And, some websites have turned to Facebook, figuring, like I said, removing the veil of anonymity is somehow going to force people to better consider their remarks. The Escapist, BuzzFeed, ESPN, these are all places that have tried this. And mostly it just bums you out to see people acting really bad while holding their kid. The long-running science publication, Popular Science, they just turned off comments and said, screw it, we're done. They cited the study that I was mentioning before. YouTube is turning to sort of like robotic automation to try and solve it through an algorithm. You can also block certain words, and posts by content creators and established personalities have a bigger voice and move higher up on the page. And we might be able to take some lessons from how games themselves are handling this. So in League of Legends, developer Riot Games has been running a lot of really crazy experiments on their players. For example, player chat, where everyone can kind of talk regardless of what side they're on, used to be on by default. And the result was that 80% of the chatting was characterized as what they called extremely negative. Only 8.7% was considered extremely positive. And when the chat became opt-in, so you had to like hit a button in order for that chat to pop up, the negative chat went down 32.7%, and the positive chat went up 34.5% just by making it a little bit harder to engage with. So basically, by removing the chat, they increased the amount of positivity in a game and a genre that is known for a lot of toxicity. And there might be something to think about that when it comes to the way comment sections are displayed on web pages and how easy it is to immediately type something in. And perhaps a little bit crazier and a little bit creepier is what happened when they started playing with colors. So Riot dubbed this the Optimus experiment, which sounds terrifying. And they haven't shared a whole lot about the study, but one of the things they did share was that a red message about negative behavior that was put in during the game's loading screen prompted a larger decrease in negative player behavior than the very same message when it was just white. And a message encouraging positive behavior saw an observable change in positive behavior when the message was blue, but no change when the message was white. But somehow these colors are influencing how people go in to the commentary they bring into content on the internet, and it seems like we're seeing an increasing science that shows like these things we think don't matter actually matter quite a bit. And a lot of what I'm talking about today, it's about games. Like, you know, I take games seriously, way too seriously. But it's a medium that's kind of largely about abstraction. Like, it's not, you know, it's not my family. And on July 3rd, 2012, I received a phone call from my brother. A phone call that I'd missed about 20 times before I realized, hey, 20 times is a lot of times to call someone. And it turns out that my father had passed away of a heart attack at 56 years old. My father has, and always will be the biggest supporter of what I've done, even if he often had no idea what exactly I did. When he passed, I was only a short few weeks away from getting married, so he just missed it. And about 24 hours after this happened, I decided I should share the news on Twitter. I mean, most of my life is on the internet, so why wouldn't I share this too? So I did, and then I turned off my phone to go be with my family. When I turned it back on, like, some of the messages were, you know, I've seen some bad stuff, but, you know, I wasn't prepared to tweet a picture of a bonfire and have someone ask if I was burning my father's body. I wasn't prepared for someone to tell me they were glad my father passed because it means I wasn't part of my job for a couple of weeks. My father's passing was the first time I was forced to deal with death outside of a horror film, and while also realizing that people will use anything to try and hurt you. But at the same time, the Giant Bomb community started a thread with well wishes about my work and anonymous comments about my father, a person none of them had met and never would meet. And there were hundreds of messages, and I kept this thread bookmarked on my phone during the first week of my father's passing and would just take that into the bathroom, kind of read it, not really taking anything in, and just cry. It was a showing of genuine compassion from a bunch of people who only knew me from what I put out there. And when I needed them, they had my back. 99% of the internet has been nothing but nice to me, and it is so easy to focus on that 1%. And whenever someone gets under my skin, I reach into my bag that is right here, and tucked into that bag are a series of letters that people have written me over the years, thanking me for something I've done or something I've written. These letters mean something to me because those people reached out and connected. It's important to remind yourself of the good in the world and the surprising kindness of strangers. Because Twitter can be a negative place, comments can be a negative place, you know. I do think there's hope, and I think we can use these tools to connect with one another. In the games industry, women use the one reason why hashtag to explain one reason why more women aren't making video games. It was a powerful adoption of a tool that is usually assigned to the corners of beer commercials. But here it was an outlet, a lifeline, a way for someone who felt marginalized to read thousands of messages that told them you are not alone. So how can you help? I think you can start by speaking up. I don't mean you should shout down others, but speak up, because I think most of you are like a lot of us. We're the silent majority of internet users, the vast majority who are nice and reasonable. We just don't say anything. And you know, think about the way you use Yelp or Amazon reviews. When you have a bad experience, we're so quick to get in there, give our 1 star, and let them know how shitty it was. When something's great, we don't say anything and just kind of go on our way. That's how we treat everything, and it's something we can change. If you appreciate what someone has to say, you should tell them. If you liked someone's game, make sure you let them know. We may not be able to eliminate all the toxicity on the internet, but we can increase the amount of positivity that people see. We can't control what other people do. We can only control what we do. It's very easy to sit on the sidelines, laugh at how the internet has become this cesspool of discourse, and just throw up your hands. Because what can one person do? One person can't hold back a hurricane, but everything starts with a single person choosing to stand up. We can make it socially unacceptable to treat others without respect on the internet. We can reach out when someone is being bullied for saying something new. The next time I want to tell someone to die in a fire just because they don't agree with me, I'm not going to do that. We can't stop everything terrible on the internet, and we're never going to agree on everything. But is the alternative giving up a conversation with a stranger, someone I'll never meet, someone that just might genuinely surprise me? I won't concede something so powerful to such a vocal minority that doesn't deserve it. The internet is a tool that can connect us, and it can tear us apart. It's also a reflection of us, and right now that reflection is pretty damn ugly. But together we can turn the internet into a more positive place. Together we can give people the courage to stand up, and together we can make the internet a safe place for radical ideas. So please speak up, because if you don't, who will? Thanks. Thank you.
Tough act to follow. So I'm Zoe Quinn. I'm an independent game developer. I was one of those Twitter issues of the day a couple months back. I don't know if some of you have seen that, but I made a game called Depression Quest, which at one point enraged a certain subset of the internet enough to send death threats to my phone, and like weird sexual threats, and send these things to my house and to my phone, and I actually had to change my phone number. I know harassment's kind of a tough subject, and it's not one I particularly enjoy talking about, but I think that I might have some insight from being in that position about what we can do about it, which is the thing I am more interested in talking about. Internet harassment is not simply something you can avoid or ignore. As a game developer, digital distribution is my primary market, and it's part of my workplace. Even before that, I grew up in an incredibly small town in upstate New York, and if it wasn't for the internet, I don't know how I would have met the people that I met that led to me getting out of there and becoming a game designer. And I know that I'm so far from alone in that. It's where so many of us find each other. It's where we build communities. And for some people who can't travel or are isolated or have very specific needs in what they look for in community, it's sometimes the only community they'll ever have. Simply ignoring the problem in the hopes that it'll go away doesn't do the value of the internet justice. It doesn't do the majesty that we have to just reach out and talk to someone on the other side of the planet that might care about this one silly little thing that we thought we were alone with. Like, that is such a valuable thing, and we need to do that justice. So when it started happening to me, I wanted to find out why people act like this online, and more importantly, how to eventually get them to stop or grow out of it. So I started talking to people. I put out a bunch of calls basically saying, hey, if you used to be like this, if you used to be one of the people that would send these awful things to people, and you grew out of it, talk to me. I want to know what changed. I want to know your story. No judgment, no pressure. Let's just talk. And since then, I've talked to over 300 people that have been willing to share their stories with me, which again, something that only would have happened because of the internet. Every story is different, but patterns did tend to emerge, and this is what I learned as a result of my incredibly unscientific research. The number one thing that they all had in common was that, to some degree, they didn't think of the other person on the side of the computer as an actual person. They were sort of this weird, abstract concept of a person. I do still believe that people are basically good, and that if they could really grasp the consequences of what this might have on some people, because we see these drastic, dire consequences that lead to some people actually taking their own lives. If people could actually wrap their head around that, I don't think we'd see it as widespread as we do. And for what it's worth, like almost all of the 300 plus people I talked to, like, didn't have anything in common except for that one thing. All of them said that depersonalization happened. It became sort of a game or a pastime, like this other nebulous concept was a system that they could poke and prod at and get certain responses. It was like a game to them. Another one that came up a lot when asked how they changed was that almost all of them said that they got better friends, or that the people around them basically stood up and said, hey, that's not cool. Therein lies, I think, one of the most useful tools that we have to combat this sort of behavior. It's just those 3 simple words: not cool, dude. or chick or whatever. Just not cool, okay? And it's just so small and so simple and kind of, it's not even inflammatory in nature, just basically just standing up and say, hey, not cool. This sort of behavior sort of like thrives in silence, and it thrives, like as Patrick said, on the silence of good people not saying anything or not speaking up and drowning that out with positivity. And I know nobody wants to be the buzzkill, nobody wants to be that guy who's like, hey, maybe don't do that. But God forbid, like we actually open up and stop and drop the sarcasm and the irony for 5 seconds and be willing to be vulnerable and take that risk. You don't know what kind of impact that can even have on somebody to actually reach out and just drop it for 5 seconds and say, hey, can we just not? Another thing that respondents said commonly is that they heard about it enough to realize it was a problem. So while it can be a real bummer to hear stuff like this all the time, and why I can see people all the time being like, oh God, another one of these stories. Yeah, I know that the internet sucks. Why are we still talking about this? It actually really does help. Like maybe you've heard it 1,000 times, but maybe somebody needs to hear it 1,001. So it's really important to make it so that we have these communities where people feel like they can speak out, where someone speaks out, it's not, ugh, not again, but it's, oh, cool, thank you for reaching out. Because if we make it feel like it's so uncool or so wrong to just be open about your experiences and say how these things are affecting you, then less people are gonna come forward, less people are going to hear it for that 1,000th time that they need to hear it for, and it's just gonna drown in that silence that we keep mentioning. And the more people come forward, I think the less often we'll actually see stories like mine or Patrick's, because if it's open enough that we actually can make these changes and people will harass less and it'll become this sort of cyclical, awesome healing factor instead of just currently what it is now. Lastly, what contributed to people changing so often is that one small minor thing sort of set off this cascade in their mind of humanizing the other person on the line. This one is tricky and unpredictable because every time somebody mentioned something like this, it was something different. But it was always small. It was always something you wouldn't expect. The most common type of thing that seemed to have this humanizing effect was the person on the other end didn't react with anger. They didn't just try and shout people down, but they were just honest about how they felt. And I know it's kind of scary and can be asking a lot to just be honest with your feelings and be vulnerable, especially in a place like the internet, where it's seen like throwing chum in a piranha tank. But that you might actually be impacting the way, like someone might actually stop and think. I saw this recently. A writer friend of mine who is horribly guilty of reading the comments constantly, always, so much so that we have to hide his phone from him sometimes, had this engagement with somebody who started off calling him a hack and like just not even like in a constructive way, just completely tearing apart his work in ways that were just personal. And he sat there and he engaged and actually was like, oh, well, I know my writing style is kind of weird and it's cool if you don't like it. A lot of people don't. And the guy's like, but crap, you're a human, that's terrible, I can't do this anymore, I'm sorry. And then you see that sort of apology actually come out of this by just engaging with it honestly, and that's like a really difficult thing to do, and I don't expect anybody to be able to do that, but if you can, maybe give it a shot. One of the things that was true across all these things too is that there was never one specific turning point. Change moves at a glacier's pace, and it's all a cumulative effect. And this makes it incredibly frustrating to tackle because you might not see the actual benefits of speaking up ever. Like it might happen as a drop in a bucket that someone realizes years later. It might happen to be that they're so embarrassed afterwards that they feel like they can't say anything or own up to it. But just because you might not see it firsthand doesn't mean it's not worth doing. That means that we can't give up if we don't hear immediate feedback. That means that we have to keep pushing because it's such a small thing, but it's just cumulative. And the more and more it happens, the more and more likely that we can keep this conversation going and make the internet and gaming communities better for everybody involved with it. It might be hard to not get stressed out every time you say, hey, not cool, and get this sort of bile back and then not see the effect, but it's important to think that you might be telling someone exactly what they need to hear in the moment. This also means that don't feed the trolls has become almost completely useless advice. Even calling this what we're talking about trolling is disingenuous. Let's call it what it is. It's harassment. You wouldn't say this stuff to someone in a bar. You wouldn't say it to a friend as a joke. It's harassment. Suggesting that we stay silent in the face of all this and that we don't engage in, that we don't talk about it, only perpetuates it further. And it makes it that much harder for these people to understand the consequences of their actions. It makes it that much harder for the people who are asked to even just talk about it. It isolates the people going through these things and makes them feel like speaking out or venting is somehow wrong. It's especially not helpful because all these things that move towards changing people's minds and getting them to realize what's going on have one major thing in common. It's that talking happened. It's that they heard these things. So staying silent is just becoming almost completely useful and kind of getting in our own way. I know that not everyone can change or grow out of this behavior, but it's a really good assumption to start with, since you can't tell who will or who won't and when it's going to happen. We have more to gain by starting off with the hope that people can be the people want to be the best version of themselves that they can be, and that people are fundamentally capable of empathy and kindness, or even just tolerance. And then it's better to do that than come to a more jaded worldview. And I feel like if we do that, then we've really lost this fight. As Patrick said, you can only really control what you do, though. I'd like to take some time to talk about how you can take care of yourself, or, God forbid, your friends, if this happens to you or someone you care about ever. The only way I know how to do this is to tell you what helped me, in hopes that if you ever find yourself or someone you love in a similar situation, maybe you find something in this that's valuable for you. When things got too overwhelming and too real, I ended up going out and doing something deliberately ridiculous. So I subscribe to a lot of absurdist theory, and I feel like that's a good way to get through a lot of stuff. The day that I had to change my phone number, several days after that I had to change my phone number when Indie Static covered the harassment on me and it blew up and somehow got worse, which is fine because honestly it got a lot of really important conversations going, and a lot of people came out and were like, oh, I can talk about this thing now. I went out with a friend because I had just found out that in changing my number, my family could reach me for 3 days to tell me that my father was in the ICU, and that despite trying to keep my head up and growing a thicker skin and shrug it off, which doesn't work, it still managed to impact my life. So a friend took me out, and we were talking, and we ended up, lots of people kept saying, oh, maybe you should go break something. But I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And then we were talking at a Walmart at 2 in the morning, and we passed a ceramic Angry Birds piggy bank. So I got that. I filled it with sequins because, harassment or not, I am still a game designer and I care about particle physics. We went up to the roof of this theater that he managed and threw it off as a sacrifice to the video game gods in the hopes that somehow it would make things easier. And as completely asinine as it was, and I know that I don't believe that there are gods of video games, probably. Just taking the break from all of that when things were too serious and just being deliberately asinine made everything that had previously seemed so heavy and so huge not quite as powerful as it was then. And it provided a good break to let off some steam that I really needed. It also really helps to talk to people who have nothing to do with games at all and sort of take a break from our own microcosm, because as huge as our communities are and how big gaming has gotten, it's still kind of a small world, right? Especially when these are happening in little pockets of it. It really helps to realize in the grand scheme of things that there's a life outside of video games. It can feel that sometimes that the world is huge and intimidating and that's all there is, but there really is stuff outside of it. For a while, all my friends were other developers, and anytime some kind of scene drama happened, it would really get to me, even if it had nothing to do with me. So now it's a really good tactic I have to take a step away from that and go do something completely unrelated to games. Another way that really helped was to save the worst things people say in comments and do really dumb dramatic readings of it with your friends. It especially helps if they have their own stuff to go with. My text message alert is actually sent to a recording of another developer doing a terrible voice of one of my comments, and it's really great for it to go off while I'm in a crowded room of people who don't know me, and they're just like, that takes these stupid comments, or I'm going to show you my favorite one, which isn't really that bad, it's just really funny. It takes the power away from these things, and it turns it into a joke. And that's the best thing you can ever do to something like that, is to turn it into a joke. I fully believe that humor has one of the most beneficial healing effects that we can do for ourselves, that we can do for each other. That's why anytime someone tries to start shit with me on Twitter now, just throwing stuff out there, I have a folder full of 30-second YouTubes of the most ridiculous things I can find, and that's what I respond with, is just something completely asinine and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were being ridiculous. Additionally, when I'm having one of those days when the internet can feel like a place full of raging jerks, it helps me to go do something nice for someone else, usually while also being very silly. I have this OkCupid account called Your Senpai, And what I like to do is I like to search for people who have in their profile that they wish senpai would notice them. And then I notice them. And it's just so dumb, but it's like you make someone else's day and just with this, and that like totally, if you can be the good kind of weird on the internet, instead of dealing with just the bad kind of weird, I think it's got a really positive effect. I also like to help others struggling or new game designers, even if it's just taking some time out to play their game and give them some feedback to signal boost good work, or to point them in the direction of some resources that they might need. Doing this sort of thing provides immediate proof that it's not all bad because you're being that good that you want to exist more of. And I fully believe that there's so much good being done by internet communities. Like, for example, the chairman of the Independent Games Festival, Brandon Boyer, got totally screwed over by health insurance, had like, I think $100,000 that he needed to just basically get by. We raised that for him in like 48 hours. That is what the internet communities can do. And for every stupid thing that happens, there's something like that. I've been helped out so many times by the goodness of people online. And I feel like it's important to add our voices to that conversation instead of just swallowing bile from the other side of it. Another thing is, don't feel that you shouldn't be affected by these things. Should is basically the worst word in the English language. Just because you feel like you shouldn't care, it's just the internet, that doesn't actually change how you feel. All it does is give you another thing to feel like you failed at. And that's not really helpful. And it doesn't even mean much if you do still feel that way regardless. And that's why I don't like to ask people to just grow a thicker skin or just shrug it off, because that seems like coming at it from the wrong point. It doesn't actually affect anything. It just makes you feel like you messed up, because there's no right way to feel. There's just how you actually feel. And it's really important to let yourself have that. I also hear a lot of developers who are privileged in one way or another tell me like they don't feel like they can even be upset about some of the harassment that they face, and which really sucks. If you're like, I mentioned like some of the rape threats or death threats I get, and someone's like, oh man, all I get is people telling me I'm a hack. I don't feel like I can even, and it's like, no, don't do that to yourself. It's really important to be aware that maybe my hate mail bag will be very different from like a straight white man's, but that doesn't mean that theirs is empty, and it doesn't mean that what's in it is somehow invalidated. So if you are someone who cares about these things, being conscious of your own privilege is super important and amazing. And instead of using that to feel crappy about yourself, try to use that as a tool to empathize better with somebody who's maybe lower down on the rung than you. And that way it becomes something that's actually useful instead of something you can just beat yourself up for and disengage with entirely. I'd like to encourage you to talk about it in any way you feel comfortable. If that's not at all, that's fine too. Make sure you have to take care of yourself first and foremost. Not everyone can try and fight back, and even those who can't do it every single day. It's important to not feel badly about that either. Nobody's some superhero that can engage with all of the things all of the time, and that's fine. We're all human, and a lot of this is about accepting the fact that we're vulnerable. But if you can talk about it, do. Be open. Show how it's affecting you. Don't retreat into show no weakness PR mode. I know that it feels like opening yourself up for more hate, but being impacted and having feelings isn't weakness. It's a simple reality, and it's what makes us human. And hearing about that from the other side can not only change somebody's mind, but you'll also become a beacon for other people that are feeling alone and feeling like they shouldn't have these feelings or that they should just get over it. I'm tired of seeing people disengage or leave games or think that we're all just a bunch of vile kids, right? Like, it's not the case by far, overwhelmingly so. And I'm tired of seeing other developers leave because they can't deal with this. I'd never begrudge them for it, but I think we can change this. And because at the end of the day, we're not alone, and other people understand what we're going through. And if you speak up, someone might reach out to you, someone might need to hear it, and other people might stand up with you and fight for you as well. To me, that's really where the games community actually shines. We excel at building communities. The internet community is one that kind of needs our help right now. Which is one that needs help to be better, safer, and more accepting and tolerant, and that we can welcome more people into games and have their voices be heard. Instead of not feeding the trolls, let's feed ourselves and our communities and make this a better place for everybody to be. Thank you.
There you go.
Is that okay? This is really good. I can follow it. I can follow it.
You did a very good job. Well, unfortunately, so many of you showed up that we have like barely any time to answer any questions, which is a really great great problem to have. But if there is any questions that people would like to ask, we can try and squeeze one or two of them in if you wanted to come up to the microphone. Oh, we have 10 minutes? Oh, okay, we have more time.
Glorious.
Test, test.
Thank you all for everyone who's coming, who's leading. It's okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
Mine's kind of a crappy question, but it's something that I thought of while you were in your earlier part of your talk, Patrick. Well, first of all, actually, I want to say I am part of the silent majority, as is probably everyone here, and I want to say thank you for everything that you do to make the internet better, including this talk and including your being positive on your articles and all that stuff. I know I don't comment, and I know a lot of people don't comment on things like that, but just thank you for everything that you do.
Thanks.
My question is, recently there's been kind of, like with the whole Google Plus thing on YouTube, there have been a lot of YouTubers who have turned off comments and brought comments to other forums, like Reddit, or for example, you guys have your Giant Bomb forums. What do you think about taking things away from the more poisonous areas? I mean, like Twitter, Twitter isn't so bad, but like YouTube comments and stuff, and taking it to somewhere that's easier to control and safer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really complicated question. I mean, a lot of what you're asking is like when you have these places that seem like they're more prone to the more toxic behavior, like, if just removing comments like into a more structured environment, like, is that the solution? Like, I don't think so. I think like one thing we don't consider as a consequence of the communication tools we've created is that all communication tools have made it very easy for us to share things, but there hasn't been a lot of thought put into what happens once those things are shared. So it's very easy to say things, it's very easy to broadcast, but then when things like harassment does occur, Twitter is not capable, even now, despite having an IPO, capable of like dealing with harassment and abuse. And it's not something they put a lot of focus in. It's not a lot of time that a lot of these social networks spend a lot of time focusing on. And that's something that these companies need. I think there are interesting solutions that we just don't have yet. Because right now it's very easy to be loud, but it's very hard to turn down the volume if that's what you want to do.
All right, thank you.
Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, so I forgot we have these. John Renish, who's a employee at Ubisoft, gave this to me at GDC. He gave me a social justice warrior cop badge. Because I think that term is a whole bunch of bullshit, and I'm not going to apologize for like standing up for other people and standing beside them. So because you asked a question, you've now been deputized, and you can now come up here and you can, you're a social justice warrior cop. Use
Honestly,
it responsibly.
it sounds like a badass story. If people really wanted to make fun of people for caring about social issues, coming up with a less metal-sounding term probably would have been a better idea.
Hi. So I was curious about just basically when you retweet somebody's just hatred just towards you or anybody does it, I was wondering if you were all worried about that's kind of what they want you to do as far as putting their face out there. No matter how pathetic it is, that they want attention any way they can get it. So I was wondering if that's any kind of concern you have when you do retweet something just horrible.
I mean, I think that's, it's interesting. I think when you sort of retweet harassment, it's one sort of an acknowledgement that it exists. It's something Zoe talked about of like pretending that you just don't feed the trolls and then thus you are a victim who just has to silently sort of deal with the harassment. Like, that doesn't seem like a good solution for the person being harassed. And so when you retweet stuff like that, at least when I do, it's A, about showing that it's happening, and then B, it's not so much that you're hoping that person changes their mind, but it's a lot of what Zoe mentioned of like maybe someone else sees that and goes like, oh, I don't want to be like that. Or the guy that I highlighted who like when he was forced to explain what he does, he kind of just realized he was being ridiculous. And so it's twofold. It's one for the person who's dealing with that harassment, and then it's hopefully other people see that and maybe the light bulb clicks for them. Yeah.
I'd actually like to propose an alternate solution. Don't retweet them, screen cap it, and then remove their avatar and name. Because like part of it too is when you have so many Twitter followers, especially because a lot of people care about you if they do follow you, it sucks to have other people dogpile on that person, and I feel like that might push them further away from actually listening, because people can get really freaking mean, even if they do have your best interest and they do think that sort of thing is uncalled for and awful. And as much as I think that I won't begrudge anybody their anger at things like this, I think it might be a better solution to just remove their identity from it, because then A, they don't get that attention, and B, if you might have some unintended fallout from somebody being an asshole to someone who's being an asshole, which is like this asshole Ouroboros.
Thank you.
Well, you're now a cop now, so
Yeah.
be careful out there.
Now people can demand your gun and badge, so be careful. Don't be a loose cannon.
Hi. The end of that question was pretty much what I was interested in. Patrick, you had just put something up about a response to putting out someone's Twitter handle because of the Threes 1024 2048 story.
Right. Yeah. So basically, what he's alluding to is that I had written an article about Threes and the cloning that was surrounding it, and one of the guys who was the designers chiefly responsible for a lot of the popularized cloning was a developer that would not get back to me. And when I sort of recounted that when we were doing our morning show, like, it really irritated me that he didn't get back to me. And I mentioned that on Twitter in a way that was like, well, and here's the guy, which is using the power that you wield by having lots of people that follow you in a really, really bad way. Like, that guy has no responsibility to get back to me. As a reporter, I can go to whatever lengths I can privately, but just sort of saying like, hey, you jerk, like, why don't you respond to me, is using the mob in a way that's really inappropriate. And it's just really easy to forget that. You don't think about the fact that I have 53,000 people following me. It's my Twitter account on my phone. And then it goes out and people are like, hey, that's not cool. And it's like, yeah, you know, you're probably right. Like, that was not the way to handle that.
So how do you draw the line between calling out people who are legitimately bad actors, like perhaps this guy was, maybe, or people who, again in the Threes story, the guy who made 1024, the 19-year-old in Italy, who didn't, whether you believe it or not, claims to not know that Threes was even existed.
I mean, a lot of what you're asking is like how you handle like spotlighting, you know, these things, and when you are using that to sort of point the mob in their direction. And I think that's what, you know, Zoe mentioned about being responsible about that. You know, when I file a story, it's a little bit different, you know, than it is like, you know, retweeting harassment or pointing that out. But I think it's very important to be very mindful of when you do point the finger in the direction. You may feel like you're the guy that's doing everything right, and you might just be actively participating in the thing you're trying to avoid.
Part of it, too, is I think it might be more helpful to focus on a specific behavior instead of falling into this good person, bad person dichotomy. Because, like, a lot of times you end up seeing, like, oh, well, that person's a good person, so it doesn't matter that they said this really shitty thing. Or that person's a bad person, so they can never be anything but a bad person. And it really doesn't let people change or grow. And it doesn't actually address what the real problem is, which is what they're putting out into the world. So, personally, I feel like it might be more helpful to say, that this person said this thing, and this thing is the part that's fucked up, and here's why. Not fuck this guy forever. Like, that doesn't really help anything, and that gives nobody any chance to grow and improve. And stuff like that really, really freaking sucks, because like then it's like harder for things to get better and for people to knock it the hell off.
Cool.
Thank you guys very much.
Come on, partner.
Hi, so this actually ties into his question a little bit, and also just shifting how we engage on the internet. I'm curious what your feelings are on irony and sarcasm on the internet, and whether the negative effects of that outweigh any sort of positive benefits of using that as humor to transform someone's opinion on something.
Yeah, I mean, that's really tough. Like in my, you know, Diana Fire example, like being sarcastic is tough. And then the people who, you know, want to see that comment in a certain light because they don't like you, that just validates, you know, everything they've been sort of saying about you. And I think sarcasm and irony, especially as it relates to, you know, how we say don't feed the trolls and don't go into comment sections, like, you know, I think that sucks, right? Like that's just a large internet defense mechanism to try and rationalize why we're giving up control of these sections to people. And because we advise people to not go into them, then there is less people speaking up, which means it just self-perpetuates over and over and over and over again to the point where we're just actively avoiding those places, which is, I think, unfortunate because I think these tools are amazing and allow us to connect in ways that you would never meet some people otherwise. And to not participate in them, I think, is unfortunate. But yeah, I think it's mostly a defense mechanism that, hopefully we can try and change a little bit as we go forward.
Part of it's like, are you actually being sarcastic, or are you just saying really shitty things and hoping people clue into that for some reason? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people don't realize that people online probably don't know you, and it's not like you can convey a tone of voice in the same way that you could in person. So when being sarcastic or ironic, you better be freaking clear, because honestly, when it's just open to interpretation, especially if you're saying something awful, then there's 1,000 ways that can be actually harmful to people, and then it's not really a coping mechanism. Then you're just being an ass. And sarcasm and irony mean things, goddammit. It's not just lazy humor like a lot of people use it as.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Well, unfortunately, we're at time. I want to thank everyone that came out. I want to thank Zoe for being on stage with me. I want to thank Vinny Caravella and Drew Scanlon for filming it, carrying a tripod around. Thank you so much for coming. Go be good people on the internet.